Hey, what's up guys? My name is Sal, and this is another expedition log. Today we're continuing the ExLog Phase 4 Zamias triptych. Last week we saw the entire life of the now demolished Warren Mall, and next week we'll see its sister, the Indiana Mall, which is also from the 1970s. But this week we're headed out to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, to Zamias' hometown, to take a tour through a troubled mall that Zamias built in the 1990s. As always, during this COVID-19 pandemic, I hope you're all well and taking care of yourselves. And as the world slowly begins to open back up, I implore all of you to still practice social distancing and to protect those around you, even if you think you're healthy. Let's really try to avoid a second wave so we can all get back to business. So while we might not be able to visit malls just yet, come take a walk with me through the Johnstown Galleria. But first, a word from our sponsor, the campiest action movie from the 1990s set in Baltimore, including some of the worst fighting scenes I've ever witnessed. This movie is so terrible that it's great. For your consideration, I present Undefeatable. Enjoy.
Okay, tough guy, come and get something for free. Come on, tough guy!
So I make a little bit of money on the side. Big deal. I have bills to pay. I have a sister in college.
Stay off the streets. You'll live longer. How's Anna? You taking care of her?
Yeah, real good.
Enjoy it while you can, Stingray. Monday we're back in the gym.
Later, Lou.
Anna, baby, I'm home.
Anna,
I have a surprise for you.
Anna, where are you? I said I'm home. Did you hear me?
I deserve better, and I'm leaving you.
Hello, Anna. Anna, you're coming with me.
Yeah, you're crazy. My name's not Anna. Hey!
We think your sister was murdered. I need you to identify the body.
I just wanted you to know how sorry I am. No thanks.
All week, what have you been doing?
I've been busy.
Doing what?
Who in the hell are you?
Sergeant DeMarco, Metro Homicide. Where's Dembski?
Anything for you.
You looking for me, Lou?
Hey, Stingray.
No, we're all friends.
Damn, I can't believe we got this close only to lose this guy. We've got to find his warehouse before he kills anyone else.
Keep an eye out for you, Stingray.
Yeah. See ya.
On September 18th, 1990, word began circulating that two new malls would be set to open in 1993. George D. Zamias would be building new malls in Johnstown and Altoona. Initially, the plan was to have JCPenney, Sears, and Horns serving as the senior anchors for both malls. Then on June 22, 1991, plans solidified for the mall in Johnstown, which was Zamias' hometown and where he built the headquarters for his real estate firm. The general contractor for the project was the Hoare Construction Company of Birmingham, Alabama, who employed over 1,000 people for the job. The mall was designed by the Kiva J. Kext architectural firm of Cleveland, Ohio, who received multiple awards for their designs, including the Antelope Valley Mall in Palmdale, California, of whom Zamias was a joint partner in the project. The mall in Johnstown was scheduled to open by March of 1993 and would ultimately cost over $200 million. Groundbreaking ceremonies were held the following Wednesday on June 26, 1991. Boscov's would be the first to open, having the official grand opening on September 21, 1992. At big grand openings like this, for malls and for department stores, there's typically a ceremonial ribbon-cutting event. For the Boscov's grand opening, Albert Boscov displayed a ribbon made of 23 $100 bills, and he said, quote, "The ribbon of money was donated to the member agencies of the United Way of Greater Johnstown as a symbol of the new store's intent to be an active, participating member of the Johnstown community." Close quote. The 150,000 square foot Boscov's would feature a normal array of departments, along with a travel center, optical and hearing centers, a photo lab, hair and garden centers, and the Boscov's signature community auditorium. You'll see a bit of the Boscov's briefly a little bit later in the episode, but I do plan to come back to this mall once everything reopens to check up on it and see how it's doing, especially to get a deeper dive through the Boscov's. Zamias was well ahead of schedule when building this mall, and I think that's partly due to the fact that he had built the York Galleria in 1989, which served as the prototype for the Johnstown Galleria. I'll be visiting the York Galleria soon, so stay tuned for that.
The science of skincare, the art of makeup, the allure of fragrance. The world of Estee Lauder is a beautiful place to be. Visit your Estee Lauder beauty advisor today and you'll receive this gift, including white linen body cream and more whole hair spray. Yours with any Estee Lauder purchase at $12.50. This gift is yours through August 20th at Horns.
The Johnstown Galleria Mall had its grand opening 1 month after the Boscov's, opening on Wednesday, October 21st, 1992. Serving alongside the Boscov's as senior anchors were Bon-Ton, JCPenney, and Sears. The mall would have a gross leasable area of 894,646 square feet. But looking at the original plot plan for this mall, there was space left for a fifth senior anchor, which would have been the largest, coming in at 170,000 square feet. The proposed fifth senior anchor, along with 2 smaller expansion department stores, would have given the mall an overall covered area of 1,106,746 square feet. Towards the end of the video, you'll see the grassy area where the fifth anchor would have been. My guess is that this space was reserved for Horns, as it was announced in 1990. This is that space that you're looking at right now. But after 145 years serving the surrounding Pittsburgh area, the Horns chain was bought out by Dillard's in 1992 after a few years of negotiation. Zamias never approached Dillard's to fill the space, and a deal for them to become a senior anchor at Johnstown never came to fruition. So the fifth anchor space was never filled, and sits as a big grassy field now in a dry walled off space that would have been its door, just waiting for redevelopment. But I doubt anything will ever get built there. This is the courtyard where the fifth anchor would have been. In my last video, ExLog 59, which covered the Warren Mall, the first gray ghost, we saw an example of a mall built in the late 1970s and discussed how malls had their moment in the 1980s. We also discussed how those small rural malls were the places that kids grew up but would ultimately outgrow as the population would gray out, and they would grow up seeking more variety in nicer, larger malls. Warren Mall is a fantastic example of 70s aesthetic language for malls. They were dark, only lit by mercury vapor and spotted fluorescence, with conversation pits and or seating areas, with planters and fountains, bringing the only natural light in, with the skylights meant to give these trees and plants some much needed sunlight. Malls were dark in the 70s, and as neon tried illuminating them into the late 1980s, the 90s were when bright open spaces in malls had their moment. The Johnstown Galleria is a perfect example of this new aesthetic language, where clerestory windows would provide some lighting in Victor Gruen-esque type malls from the 60s. They would give way in the 1990s to football field-length skylights along the entire concourse and exposed metal frameworks, leaving you with no doubt in your mind that the mall you're in is structurally sound, giving you a raw sense of trust for this grand monument to consumerism. Malls in the 90s took the darkness and diminutive nature of the small gray ghosts of the 70s and 80s and exploited what the kids disliked about their childhood malls to make way for grand lambent statements. Massive bright spaces with speckled neon to remind them of their childhood, but with the amenities that could cater to teenagers and young adults. Big food courts with tons of options and wide spaces for big groups to hang out. Malls in the 90s had machismo. Just like those campy action movies in the 90s, like the sponsor for this episode, Undefeatable. It was all about glamour, panache, and animal magnetism, drawing people into the mall to join in on fads of the 1990s and to show off their wares in large public groups. Big hair and bangles ruled the day, and chewing gum so loudly that it drowned out anyone that wasn't talking about the latest heartthrob or fad in whatever magazine was popular at the time. The 90s were a selfish popularity contest, and I mean that in the best way possible. The malls in this time were intended to show up their dark gray ghost predecessors, and they piled on the hairspray, and they offered no excuses. Needless to say, while malls had their first moment in the 80s, the 90s were when malls rode that massive radical wave all the way to the shore, screaming cowabunga the entire way. And Johnstown did just that. It rode that radical seafoam colored wave all the way to shore. It only spent 7 years in the 20th century, but those years were spectacular. The mall was celebrated and enjoyed an incredible amount of success. After all, George Zamias grew up in Johnstown, and he formed his company here, so it only made sense for his company to pour their heart and soul into what they considered to be their flagship mall. They were true community people, and even had an inline tenant space at the mall dedicated to the Zamias real estate name. Adorned with more seafoam green painted metal than I've ever seen, and standing tall as the flagship Zamias Mall, the Johnstown Galleria served as the Seafoam Sentinel through the 90s with tons of success. As the mall soared into the new millennium, riding an incredibly rad wave of momentum, having lost no anchors and bringing a full tenant lineup, they were unknowingly riding that rad wave directly at a brick wall named the subprime mortgage crisis and recession of the early 2000s. The first massive setback for the mall would happen in May of 2001 when Zamias filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. They were in the midst of a legal battle with a real estate advisor in New York who was owed tons of money for developing prospectus plans. But due to a long-standing dispute on the amount owed, it came to a head when the advisors lawyered up and started slinging lawsuits. A judge ruled in favor of the advising firm, mandating that Zamias should pay over $11 million in damages. So Zamias restructured everything and started a payment plan to get their debts paid, citing positive growth in their company, which flaunted the success of several projects they launched amidst Chapter 11, along with the upcoming behemoth of a mall called the Pittsburgh Mills Project. So just 6 months into Chapter 11, and given the positive growth and on-time payments to the New York plaintiff, Zamias was able to fulfill their obligations after only half a year, and after pleading for over a year afterwards, the judges allowed Zamias to exit bankruptcy protection in October of 2003.
Behind this beautiful seafoam colored drywall is nothing. It's just a field of grass. This is where that fifth anchor was going to be, but they never got around to building it. I still think Zamias should have had at least a conversation with Dillard's. Maybe Dillard's could have saved them all. I don't know.
In July 2008, Zamias sold the Johnstown Galleria to Gemini Real Estate Advisors for $57 million, but Zamias stayed on to manage the mall. Included in this sale was the land that the mall stood on, as the anchors and outparcels were all privately owned. The sale came as a result of the financial crash of 2008 during the subprime mortgage crisis, and right before recession. The land was separated from the buildings on the mortgage due to an outstanding 99-year lease that the parcels signed when the mall was built. So Gemini now owned the land on which the mall stood, but not the buildings.
There were a lot of firsts for me at this mall, especially this calming station. I've never seen anything like this at any mall I've been to. It was like a hut for weary travelers to hide from people. I've never seen something like this before. Have you? Let me know in the comments if you have.
As grim financial forecasts would further continue to castigate the property, Gemini sold the Johnstown Galleria to Adar Johnstown LLC for $23 million in 2014. Despite the mall's growing inferiority, Zamias would remain employed as the managing entity, as it seems they just couldn't let go of their Seafoam Sentinel flagship mall. As typical in dying malls, tenants would flee after the vacancy left by a senior anchor. The concourse and courtyard of said closed anchor would slowly be vacated after the senior anchor left. But it seems that the average age for an anchor to last before changing hands is about 25 years. In the case of the Johnstown Galleria, the anchors would last a bit longer than normal, and the first anchor would shutter 26 years after opening. On Wednesday, January 31st, 2018, the Bon-Ton announced that it would be closing its location at the Johnstown Galleria. Bon-Ton had been struggling up until this point, and by February of 2018, the company announced that it was entering Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, because they haven't made an annual profit since 2010 at that point. Then on April 17th, 2018, they announced that they'd be liquidating all of their remaining 267 stores, when the Great American Group LLC and Tiger Capital Group LLC bought all remaining Bon-Ton locations and physical inventory for $775,500,000, bringing the Chapter 11 to a Chapter 7, liquidating all remaining stock. That was the end of the Bon-Ton Company. Sears Roebuck & Co. was founded in Chicago, Illinois almost 130 years ago in 1892. I covered the history of Sears extensively, including me totally butchering their opening date, saying it was 1992 instead of 1892. You can see this in ExLog 35, which covers an extensive walkthrough of the abandoned Sears at Century 3 Mall. Leave a like and an F for Century 3 in the comments. So we had a near century-and-a-half old company operating at Johnstown, and on April 27th, 2018, it was announced that Sears would be closing. In September of 2018, then CEO of Sears and total scumbag Fast Eddie Lampert said, quote, "Sears was running out of time to salvage its business," close quote.
You member of MPU to the appliance department?
They filed for Chapter 11 on October 15th because of a $134 million payment due that same day. And after getting on his knees and begging, Eddie got to keep the Sears brand, and they're still trying to get it together to this day. By July 21st, 2018, I showed up, and I was greeted with not just one anchor closing, but two. The Sears was in the process of selling the remainder of its inventory, as you just saw, as well as the JCPenney, who was closing its doors at Johnstown. The exodus of these two tenants would leave the mall with just the Boscovs as its sole senior anchor. But as it stands now in 2020, the Johnstown Galleria is open. We've seen a certain horde of gray ghosts actually shutter their doors due to COVID-19, possibly for good. But I don't see the Johnstown Galleria suffering the same fate. If you happen to be near a smaller rural mall closed by the virus, let me know down in the comments if it's opened back up. I'm dying to know if some of these places, especially the malls along the Route 80 corridor in Pennsylvania, if they're still open. So if you're local, please let me know on all of my social media or in the Dead Malls of Discord server if they're open. Links for everything are down below. By October of 2019, Adar Johnstown LLC had owed over $700,000 in delinquent real estate taxes to Cambria County, and the property was placed into receivership after they defaulted on a $13 million loan for which the Johnstown Galleria was used as collateral. By January 3rd, 2020, a judge approved an order for Spinozo Real Estate Group of Syracuse, New York to, quote, take complete and exclusive control, possession, and custody of the property, together with any and all bank accounts, close quote, on behalf of trust holders and the Deutsche Mortgage and Asset Receiving Corporation. Their goal was to maintain operation, fill vacancies in the mall, and reduce outstanding debt by maximizing profits and basically prevent the mall from tanking, with only one anchor. After 28 years of running their flagship Seafoam Sentinel, Zamias was finally out. This change might be temporary, but it might last, depending on what happens with Spinozo, and if they can turn things around. If you're local to this mall, please let me know down below or any of my other social media platforms how it's doing and if it's opened back up. The Johnstown Galleria is a masterclass in 90s mall aesthetic language, and I'd hate to see it close for good. I think it's going to become more rare to see non-super regional malls in person, let alone malls like Warren and Indiana from the 70s, and even younger malls like the Johnstown Galleria and others that were built in the 90s or even later, like Pittsburgh Mills. There's something especially extraordinary about Zamias' Johnstown Galleria. I really hope these malls survive the pandemic, as many people around the world are fighting for their lives with those around them doing everything in their power to keep themselves and their neighbors safe. These are uncertain times, but if we work together to fight for the same cause, we can come out better than we were before. By the way, this is the grassy knoll where the fabled fifth anchor would have stood, had Horns not been bought out by Dillard's, and possibly if Zamias approached Dillard's, they would have built an anchor space here. This was one of the only malls I can remember filming or researching that had the exact same anchor loadout from the mall's grand opening to the day the mall started seeing the effusive egress of its senior anchors and inline tenants. Most of the time, anchors will change hands because companies are bought out and nameplates will change. But again, it's very rare to see a mall as it was the day that it opened, including all of its senior anchors. I'd like to thank you all so much for watching this video, as producing this series under quarantine has been both therapeutic for me and a massive pain in the ass to get episodes out on a weekly basis. I expect a lot from myself in terms of production quality, and frankly, I can't wait to take a bit of a break to go explore for a few weeks to prep for future episodes. But we're all in this together, and if I'm forced to stay home, I'll keep taking you on walks with me through these awesome places. Thanks especially to my patrons, elite explorers, and those who've contributed directly to me either through these platforms. You guys keep this engine going, and without the amazing community engagement, most notably through my Twitter and Dead Malls of Discord server, I probably would have descended into insanity. Links to all of my various social media are down below. Make sure you're following me because there's a lot coming up. While the times we live in are uncertain, you can rest assured that I'll be there right along with you through this, and that next week, I'll be here to present ExLog 61 and the finale to the ExLog Phase 4 Zamias triptych with the Indiana Mall, complete with a crazy mall cop chasing me around the parking lot. But until then, please stay home if you can, stay safe, take care, and have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Are you kidding me? I said, are you gonna get my call? Stay police at this point.